If you would turn to the first presentation outline, we'll start this one. This is the book called Grit, and it is by Angela Duckworth. And I put a bio of her on page 2 in your outline. This is her first book, and it talks about her academic and professional credentials in her bio. Now, if you are adventurous, you might like to see how gritty you are. And I put the link here for how you can get your grit score. And then you can decide if you want to share that with anybody once you get your score. I am not sharing mine with you, but you may do that. And then, if you'd like just a couple of years before she wrote this book, she gave a TED talk on this subject, and you can find it at that link that I gave you in your outline. I also put for you today in your handout an interview with her about the book Grit, and that is at the very back, starting on page 5, that came from her website. And so that's for your additional reading and perhaps clarification about some of the things that I talked about today. On your outline, you see what grit is. It's a combination of passion and perseverance, which is, of course, the subtitle of the book. And, of course, what this is really all about is achievement. And the idea is that people can, in fact, advance and grow in their grittiness. Two things that is talked about here is grit and self-control, and both of those match up to give you achievement. On page 3, you can see that what grit is, it's a way that you sustain interest and effort toward long-term goals. And then self-control is how you voluntarily regulate impulses to get off track. And it's interesting, the third bullet says that individuals who are gritty are more self-controlled, but the correlation between the two is not perfect. Now, there's two themes for grit. It can be grown two ways, and these are part 2 and part 3 of the book. In part 2, she talks about how grit can be grown from the inside out, and that is by a number of means that are reflective and persistent on an individual type basis. But it also can be grown from the outside in, by a company's culture, by parenting styles and practices, and so forth. But what it's all about is grit is not for grit's sake. Grit is for achievement. And you see the two bullets on your outline, that the assumption here is that people want to seek their personal best rather than settle for their personal adequate or get by. And secondly, that reaching and extending a goal is valuable in its own right, whether it's something useful or useless. And finally, the two big ideas of grit, and she hammers this throughout the book, it predicts success more reliably than talent or IQ, and that anyone can become grittier. So I'm going to tell you all about West Point, because this is an interesting story. 14,000 people apply for West Point every year. Only 1,200 actually get in. And once you are in, you go through this thing called Beast Barracks, and it is a 7-week intense program. And y'all, she published the schedule of a day of Beast, and I looked at this thing and I was tired before breakfast. I don't know how you do the rest of the day here. So I admire the people who actually go through this. But what happens is they have what's called a whole candidate score. And what that is, it's a weighted number based on SAT, ACT scores, high school rank, expert appraisals of leadership potential, and performance measures. All of those are objective things. And she says that you can think of the whole candidate score at West Point's best guess at how much talent applicants have for the diverse rigors of its 4-year program. In other words, it's an estimate of how easily cadets will master the many skills required of a military leader. The whole candidate score, based on those things I read to you, is the single most important factor in West Point admissions. And yet it did not reliably predict who would make it through Beast. In fact, cadets with the highest whole candidate scores were just as likely to drop out as those with the lowest. So what she did a number of years ago, she administered her grit scale to West Point candidates. And what she found is that grit scores had no relationship to the whole candidate scores. In other words, how talented the cadet was said nothing about their grit, and vice versa. Grit turned out to be an astonishingly reliable predictor of who made it through and who did not. Strayers and leavers had indistinguishable whole candidate scores. What matters, she said, is grit. And then I put on your outline the conclusion here because she surveyed 2,000 adults correlating grit and life satisfaction. And she found, as it says here, the grittier a person is, the more likely they'll enjoy a healthy emotional life. To be gritty is to keep putting one foot in front of the other. To be gritty is to hold fast to an interesting and purposeful goal. To be gritty is to invest day after week after year in challenging practice. To be gritty is to fall down 7 times and rise 8. So this book has been, for a number of months, #1 on the New York Times best-selling list. It remains hugely popular today. Y'all, I wanted to at least balance this because not everybody thinks this is great. On your outline, I put a critical review that was in the New York Times and excerpted a couple of paragraphs of that. And of course, you can read that and decide what you think about it if you read or you buy the book yourself. But it's a fascinating, popular book, and I hope you enjoyed that synopsis of Grit.